Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Huckabee of the Conversations with Nicole Show. My guest today is Anthony Boddie, a dedicated community leader. Anthony's passion for helping others shines through his involvement in various charities and nonprofit organizations. As a Board of Trustees member for the Fort Mill School District and serving on multiple boards, including Defend the Fatherless and Boy Scouts of America, Anthony is dedicated to making his community a better place. In this episode, you'll learn about his journey and his role for founding the Community of Hearts Project. I hope you enjoy our inspiring conversation, and I hope you'll find the value in Anthony's approach of listen, learn, and engage. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. I am delighted to have as my guest today to the Conversations with Nicole Show, Anthony Boddie. He is a tremendous force in the Fort Mill, South Carolina area and beyond with the way that he gives back to his community, many projects that he's involved in. And I am also delighted to say he's a friend. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to have you. Tell my audience a little bit about yourself. You are not originally from South Carolina, but you made your way to the great state of South Carolina. And since then, you've just been involved in various ways. Tell my folks about yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I am from the Chicagoland area and also have Memphis roots. So I spent some time in Memphis from the age of 8 or 6 years old to like 14 or 15 years old, and then moved back to Chicago, finished high school in the northern suburbs of Chicago, and then ended up going to school in Kansas for a couple of years, and then made my way back to a local college in the Illinois area. And my background is in communications and journalism. I was the editor-in-chief of the college newspaper, was a Pacemaker finalist, which is considered the Pulitzer Prize for college journalists. And so that's one of my proudest accolades that I have been given, and made my way out to the Silicon Valley area out of college. And I lived in kind of the northern suburbs of California in the San Jose, Santa Clara area. And my background kind of surrounds the leisure and tourism industry. And so for many years, I was involved with affiliated with every major theme park, zoo, and aquarium in North America. And
That's
so I helped.
incredible.
Yeah, thank you. And so I help run businesses inside of the actual leisurely locations. And so I either signed the agreements and ran the operations, was involved in business development, you name it. And if you were ever out at any of those theme parks, you would have been exposed to the photography experiences, be it if you were on a roller coaster and you were captured with your
Yes,
expressions, or when you walked
I
through the
have one
front
of
of,
those, Anthony.
exactly correct, or when you walked in the front of a theme park, or you navigated around a theme park and zoo, and someone tried to capture you and the family's experiences. And then anything relating to arts and crafts. So those little kids that get their face paints or get their caricature sketching, anything that was kind of artsy and photography experiences. I led a multitude of different operations across the U.S.
Now we
So
know who
I
to thank for all those wonderful experiences we had when we were going to all of
exactly,
those venues.
yes, that's right. So after leaving California, I made my way to St. Louis, and there's a theme park that's based out of there. So I was based out of that location, which was Six Flags St. Louis, and I worked for a third party who ran those services inside of those and other Six Flags operations, and also Disney, SeaWorld, Universal, you name it. And then from out of St. Louis, I traveled all around the U.S. managing those businesses. And then a year or two later, going into early 2000s, I moved to Cincinnati, and there's a theme park that's based out of there named Kings Island. So I was based out of there, working for a third-party organization, and traveled all around the U.S. and Canada, leading operations. And then I made my way down to the Carolinas in 2006, and it was because of my fiance at the time, and she moved down here and became an executive for a theme park in the Carolinas named Carowinds. And
We
so
know it
we
well. We know it
that's
well and
right.
love
That's
it.
right. So we moved here in 2006 because of her. Um, and then we had a beautiful daughter named Addison, who's now a 14-year-old that's getting ready to start Nation Ford High School as a freshman. And then I kind of changed course of careers back in 2016 and started a spiritual journey.
I love that. Well, that is the perfect segue with your spiritual journey to what has led you to be involved in a multitude of ways of giving back. And before we get to that, I hope I can find the stat. When you were talking about your journey with theme parks and all of that, this statistic really blew me away when I was researching you. During your leadership positions, you were responsible for more than 2,000 team members. You had managed more than 100 million portfolio and revenues, facilitated training and trained more than 10,000 employees, and hired more than 5,000 full-time and seasonal employees over a 20-year period. That tells me you're good with dealing with people, and that
I
is
am.
what is needed when you are a member of a school board and when you are a member of a community trying to make a difference. Kudos to you. I just had to
Thank
point all
you.
that out.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that leads us to your spiritual journey. Where are we now in this? Tell me more.
I believe we all go through different things in life. And I think we all go through this roller coaster ride, and sometimes the ride is worse than others, and
Yeah.
sometimes the ride is greater than others. And so I've been fortunate and been blessed over the years to lead people, to lead teenagers, which is a really big core of my likeness for this thing we call the world, or we call life.
Yeah.
Um, and so, um, you have those periods where God is sending you these subtle messages, and sometimes you pick up on them, and sometimes you don't, and then sometimes it's after a very bad experience where you sit down and you ask yourself, um, was that meant for me, or
Right.
was it meant to be? And so I was going to church off and on at Forest Hill, and my wife and daughter were attending Forest Hill. And to be very frank with you, Nicole, I was the person who I did travel, so I wasn't home a lot over the weekends, but I was that person where every few weeks I would go to church. But then also after that, my wife and daughter would go to church and go to lunch with friends. I'd meet them for lunch. So that is
Yeah.
what would typically happen. And then I got to a point where, um, after having more than a couple bad experiences that really woke me up, or what I like to tell people is, it helped me decide how I was going to press the reset button. And
Mm.
once I decided on how I was going to press the reset button, um, I believe my calling today has been utilizing some of my God-given talents, some of the hospitality talents that I have, and utilize those in a way that could be impactful in the community. And I don't believe I used to be able to say maybe luck or coincidences. I no longer say that. I think that there's a story that's there for me to be had, and it's up to me on how I'm going to utilize and uncover what that story may be. So, Nicole, there was a period here as soon as I made the commitment and said that I was going to start going to church religiously. The pastor said on that particular day, and it was Pastor Chadwick, and he said, um, if you can't find humbleness, he will find humbleness for you. And
Oh, how
yes,
profound.
correct. And after being angry at the world for a few months, I came to a conclusion after he made that comment. I was no longer upset and angry. And so weeks after that, I ended up joining a life group or a men's group. And then this men's group led into friends asking me if I wanted to go to Charlotte to a men's shelter to feed the homeless. And so I had never done that before. And with all my travels, Nicole, I had always said that I wanted to do that, but out of sight, out of mind, I'd never done it. And so when a friend of mine named Brian Talley asked me to join his life group, we went there. It was an experience that I can't replicate it. And the aha moment as these men were walking through line and from different walks of life, and some said thank you when I was feeding them, and some didn't even say thank you, some didn't even look at me, and I left there with with a a frame of mind that I didn't want that to be the last experience with that group. So what I ended up doing was um, communicating with a few of my neighbors, and for the next 6 or 7 months, every couple of weeks, I took men from my community, a very well-to-do community, to Charlotte to go feed the homeless, and that became a multitude of great experiences for those individuals that joined me.
Life
And
changing
so,
right there. Yeah.
yes, that's right. After that, it was Community Cafe,
Oh, okay.
and Community Cafe is an organization who actually makes hot food out of a couple churches in Fort Mill. And then what happens here is there's a food truck that goes into the community, into Rock Hill, around Fort Mill, around York County. But also those that may be in need of a warm meal can actually go to a couple of churches around the area to go get fed. And so this was a continuation of me realizing that there's a story that I have no clue what's in front of me, but I'm going to answer what I believe is being called. And
Mhm.
so when I started serving on behalf or with Community Cafe, we went into a community, and it's called Blackman Road Community. And it's a community that's off of Main Road in Rock Hill. And there's probably about 25 to 30 homes that are in there, and it's families that have been there for a long time, and some that have been there like from the 60s. And so that community, in some areas, they don't have water.
Oh,
And so there's an area in the front of this community where they can go get water and fill jugs up and go wash your clothes and all those things. But one of the things that I took away from that was, and when I knocked on someone's door and they let me in, I realized that there was some help needed. So I came back to my community, posted on our Facebook um, community piece, and shared with our community there was a need. And within 5 days or 7 days, there were three garages full of items from clothing to washers and dryers to cabinets, you name it. And so that's what ended up happening. And then a local news organization reached out to me and came over to my house to interview me to find out what was this about.
I just want to interject for just a second.
Yep.
People heard the call. They responded when they realized you have neighbors, you have brothers and sisters in Christ in need, who need help. That gives me hope in mankind today through what you just told me about what you did and what your community did. That's a praise report.
Understatement. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take a moment and just acknowledge that, because too often we don't see these wonderful things happening in our world today about how people are taking the time to show love and care for people that they don't even know, for one
That's
another,
right.
which is what we are called to do to make our world a better place. Thank you for
That's
that.
right.
Okay,
Yes.
we need to go on from there.
Yes, yes, for sure, yes. So once I received those items, and I had a couple neighbors who said that I could use their garage. Um, this group of neighbors kind of came together, and it's a very well-to-do community.
Yeah.
And I think what I was most proud of was being able to really and truly see people who have the means, that are okay with getting out of their comfort zone, perhaps,
Yeah.
and willing to make a difference if they see there's a need. And so I'm going to say we had about 75 to 80 volunteers on a particular weekend. And these volunteers built cabinets in these homes. They had a big cleanup that was in this community, delivered tons of goods, spent time with with the young kids, all of those types of things. So that ended up happening. Well, this morphed into me saying that I believe there's a greater need around the area. And when I had requested or placed a list on the needs, I became overwhelmed because I received too many items and I knew it was too much for that particular community. So I was
Right.
getting ready to make a phone call and or make a post and say, we're done. Thank you so much. And a friend of mine said, Anthony, no, let it be. God's going to have a place for those items. And when I say that's the epitome of an understatement, it's an understatement. So after the goods continue to follow suit, I made a phone call to a leader in a neighboring community named the Paradise Community. And it's a community where there are many needs. And so I made a phone call and said, I have X amount of items and I need a place for them to go. And my friend said, we got a place, bring it. So we had tons of furniture. I think that day we had probably about 25 couches and sofas and refrigerators and all those things. And so we moved into this particular community. I mean, I'm talking about I had dentists, I had doctors, I had executives who were all a part of this movement, is what I call it. And the movement influenced me so much to where this went on for the next 9 to 10 months, which is every single Saturday after I had placed a post on the neighborhood Facebook page. I would have neighbors and friends from around the surrounding area meet me at the front of the clubhouse, and I would create a roadmap of what would happen. So essentially, what would happen here is that I would know who's donating, and then I would have a list of where to go pick up the items around Fort Mill, and then I would have the map on where to deliver those in the communities that were in need. And this went on for like 10 or 11 months. So it grew so fast and grew so big, became so overwhelming. And so what I ended up doing was branding it and calling it the Community of Hearts Project, which is basically the community sharing their hearts. And basically, I still call it today. It's not every weekend type of servicing project, but when people have things and items that are a necessity and they want us to give those to the community, I'm the conduit into the community. And
Wow.
that's what ended up happening.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, it just goes to show what can happen when people come together and want to help others. I mean, that's incredible. So, Community of Hearts Project continues. You're involved in Defend the Fatherless, Boy Scouts of America, and you're on the Fort Mill School District. So, you really have a passion for giving back.
I do. So some people are starting to learn that my childhood was one where I grew up in poverty. I was in a single family home. My mom had 4 kids, and we lived in the Memphis area. And I knew what government cheese was. I knew all those types of things. I was a part of sometimes lights cut off because of not being able to pay a bill or two, and sometimes even using the oven as being the heater for the apartment. And so I would say that maybe as a part of that journey or the spiritual journey and pressing a reset button, it allowed me over time to realize that I had something in common with all of these people who I was serving. And my intent was, how can I uh, do a job that many people don't want to do and could care less about, but also find a way of how I can get others who may not have cared at one point in time to get involved and to see that there is a need. And I would say, if anything that I've done over this period, that's probably one of my proudest moments, Nicole, is people acknowledging and thanking me for kind of sharing them a lane that they never had access to. But they realized that the lane that I gave them access to allowed them to be able to decide and determine how they would utilize their skill sets
Yes.
and
Their
the gifts
gifts.
that's been
Their
given to them.
So I have two questions from what you
Yes,
just
ma'am.
said. One, I want to know what reaction you received from those who have the gifts, who have been blessed. And the second question is the recipient of the blessings. I can't even imagine what it was like for the individuals who received some of these goods, some of these services, some of the cabinets being built when all of that happened. It had to be overwhelming. So start with those who actually gave the gifts and are already blessed and shared their blessings.
Yes. So I truly believe that um, there are a tremendous amount of hearts around the world. I believe there are a tremendous amount of hearts around the U.S. And I do believe there are a tremendous amount of hearts that are in well-to-do communities, and also those that may not be
Sure.
uh, as blessed but have a heart. I think at the end of the day, sometimes there may be this misinterpretation on those who may have the means to do something aren't willing to help. And what I have found and learned that's contrary to that belief. And I can share with you that I think number one, people who want to get involved, I think are more willing to get involved if they have someone or a credible source or someone that they believe in who's going to help them learn more about a particular lane. And I believe that over time, because of the consistency of what I've been doing, it hasn't been, Nicole, that I just a month or two I did and then I stopped.
Right.
There's been a continuation since 2015,
Right.
2016. And so today, many individuals call me on a weekly basis or multiple times a month on what can we do around the community. And I find myself at times saying, I don't have the bandwidth. I can't do it like I used to because I was involved in so many things.
Right.
So I can tell you a quick story that happened from a family who actually, a husband and wife that grew up in Fort Mill. He was very familiar with a particular community. And I decided there was a family, this mother who has, I think, 7 or 8 grandkids that she's responsible for. And
Wow.
so there was a need for 3 beds because the kids had been sleeping on the floor for probably about 8 or 9 months because they had moved from, or the mom couldn't pay or afford to pay for the apartment, and so they were evicted, and so they ended up with the grandmother. And so the grandmother, who has my phone number, called me and said, "Is there a way that you can find a couple beds?" So again, Anthony, doing what he does, sends email out to my Facebook world and kind of share with the world of what needs are out there. And within 15 minutes of that post, I got a phone call.
Hmm.
And so someone from my community said that they had 2 beds that they were going to give away. So I quickly called this dad, this father and son, and the son plays on Nation Forward basketball team. And I have a relationship with the young man and wrote a college recommendation letter for him and all of those things. And so I asked them if they would consider using their truck to deliver the furniture. And they said yes. And so we delivered the furniture. And when we pulled the truck in, the mom came out and the mom just lost it. She was extremely emotional. And it was one of the first times I had seen her extremely emotional. And um, uh, they deliver the furniture inside the house. And she looks at me, she hugs me, and she says, "Thank you." And she thanks the father and son that were with us.
Yeah.
Um, about 6 months later, I'm writing the college recommendation letter or interviewing the young man. as I'm preparing for his college recommendation letter, and I asked him to share with me kind of an experience that he had that impacted him, and that experience impacted him when he saw the grandmother's reaction, um, and he knew that at the end of the day, she was extremely thankful,
Yeah.
and certainly seeing, or especially after seeing the floor that the kids were sleeping on, was almost like concrete. And so that hit him square in the heart. And so I would say that that's been something that's been so impactful over time.
And that impact, you changed the grandmother's life, the grandchildren's lives, but you are making a difference in showing the younger generation their blessings and hopefully planting the seed of them wanting to do that as they grow up and as they get older, to be able to do exactly what you're doing, to give from their heart. And because you have to have that moving forward, you have to have people coming up behind you that want to do the same thing. And the reason people are following you, Anthony, is they believe in you. You've shown them who you are, as you said consistently, a man of great concern and care for others, not just doing it a one and done. It's a continuation. It is who you are in life, and that is so valuable, especially for our younger generation to see that. So, gosh, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, this is powerful.
The outcome the first year
Yes.
was, and I inventoried all this. So that first year, there were more than 4,000 articles of clothing that were donated to me. There
Wow.
was more than 100 couches, more than 50 sofas. We had about, I think it was like 60 sets of washers and dryers. We had tons of goods that were given, or dry goods that were given to me. Um, we had mattresses. We had, I'm going to say, that first year, probably 75 beds that were donated. So all that happened in 1 year, and I didn't need a garage for this, because we were going right into the communities when I found out the needs. And of
Mm.
course, when it got to a point where requests were coming in, to validate and not waste any of my volunteers' time, I would go into the homes just to put a check mark on it to make sure that there really was a need.
Wow.
And so I did those types of things because I wanted to make sure that our volunteers were involved from a purposeful perspective.
Well, blessings to you, my friend, for what you have created there, and continue to hold on to that project as it moves forward in various versions and ways. That brings me to you becoming a member of the Fort Mill School District. I mean, talk about something that is time consuming and so important when you're talking about our children, our future generation of leaders, and the time and investment. And it is not an easy job. Talk about what led you to make the decision to run, and what that uh, position has meant to you, and just give people an insight of what it's like to be a school board member.
Becoming elected official was never, I didn't believe, was a part of the script as far as I'm concerned. I was actually considering running for town council.
Okay.
And when I started looking into that, I had um, a few mothers around town who were huge supporters of mine regarding the Community Hearts Project. And they all said in a meeting we had one day, Anthony, truly believe school board could be one that you can impact. And at that time, I couldn't wrap my arms around like how big the school district was, because it was never a part of, I just was never part of my lens. My lens was elsewhere and all those things. My daughter was 7 years old or 6 years old. So just was never there. And then I made that decision. I will tell you what I know happened. And this is one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done was running and getting elected. I received over 14,000 votes first time running. And I can tell you with no equivocation, many of my supporters from the Community of Hearts Project are the ones who help disperse the word about me and where I am when it comes to authentically serving the community. And so once I decided to make that decision, I had to ask myself, how do I want to navigate being on the school board? Because there's framework and there's parameters and all those things. So just because you're a school board member and the superintendent reports to you doesn't mean you can just walk inside of a school and demand a principal or APs to do X, Y, and Z, or demand a district office. I think you got to respect everyone's turf. And my background is I'm not a micromanager. I'm one who believes that you're in a role and your job is to perform that role to the best of your ability. And so once I joined and once I learned, which I ran on 3 words, Nicole, which was listen, learn, and engage. And I live by that on a daily basis. And that comes from the experiences that I had in the hospitality. Many instances when I would walk down a midway at a theme park, and I would have a tie on, be it if it was at Disney or if it was at Six Flags or Cedar Fair or even at the Radio City Rockettes, which were clients of mine. And the family of 5 are walking down the midway and they come to me because it looks like I'm important and I have a tie on and all of that. And they share with me about a bad experience that they had. And my job representing the theme park organization is the client should know that it's a third party. So I should handle situations just like a theme park executive would. And so I think that is one of the reasons why I had such an impeccable respect in the industry as being the preferred vendor and all of those. But the bottom line is that I think from a school board perspective, you have to be able to listen, learn, and engage. And it's a people's business, a person's business. That's what the business you're in. And there are many different emotions that are involved. And one of the things I had to do was purchase a book surrounding emotional intelligence. And my emotional intelligence today is far more better than it was 4 years ago, because I realized that when I do get, even if it's a friend who is very emotional, I have to realize the place that he or she are coming from. And so that's how I've handled situations, maybe a little bit better than some, or better than what I have in past, because I realize they're human beings that have their young ones and they're important assets to society.
I've heard that a lot about emotions, and we used to talk about that when I was in the news business. The emotions really have no intellect because it's just they can't really think straight about what's happening because they're so emotional. So it's very true. You have to remember that when you are dealing with parents and their children and curriculum and people within the school that are
That's right.
leading and teaching. So such valuable information there. So thank you for doing that. And so what's next as far as your plans when it comes to the school board?
I am going to run for school board again. I was seriously considering what the next charity involvement that I would be, that I would consider. And after speaking to my family, we kind of looked at where my passions are in general and perhaps how I can leverage the passions that I have today. And so we agreed that the best choice of path today is to go one more term on the school board. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I believe there's still a lot I have in the tank when it comes to that. Nicole, I'm extremely involved in the school district, meaning I may be the most visible person. And that's not belittling anyone. It's just, it's factually true. I attend more than 100 events throughout the school year. I am very involved with our student athletes. I've written more than 350 college recommendation letters. So at the end of the day, I still believe that there's a lot I have to offer. I believe if you're an elected position, I believe you have to be visible. And I believe that the more you're visible on the street, if you will, I think it brings some credibility. And I think there are some decisions that I made in past where I think some people may have disliked, but I think some will just kind of sit back and say, you know what, I disliked on how he voted on something, but I know him very well, and I put my trust in him. And I believe that's what many people view me in the community when it comes to that. So I'm looking forward to the next chapter. I'm highly confident that I will gain a lot of, or garner a lot of support uh, from previous supporters and new ones.
I totally respect and believe in the approach that you take with being all in, being involved, and when you do have to make decisions that not everyone is going to agree with, because that's just how life is. You can't make everyone happy. That's just not
That's right.
realistic. That you still have people that understand why and still have I respect Anthony because I know that he does his due diligence. I know that he's involved. And while I may not like his decision, I respect him for the decisions that he makes because I respect him as a person. If we could have
Yes.
all elected folks thinking that way and doing that way, gosh, wouldn't
Agree.
wouldn't the world be a better place, right?
Agree. Yes, ma'am.
But we
I
won't go
agree.
down that road.
Yes, that's right.
Anyway, wishing you all the best. We're going to have to wrap things up, but as we close, what would you like folks to know about you and maybe how they can be their best self and find their purpose and be inspired, much like you are inspiring people? And I would say your past has inspired you to want to make a difference, Anthony.
I would say that we all have to find a passion, and there are many different passions that are out there. Some people, um, there's no way in the world that they can see themselves going out and helping particular communities and believe that they can make a difference there. I just believe that there are many things that surround this thing we call life, and I think that when you see or sense that you can help in some kind of capacity, um, that's where I think one could be extremely successful. I think one of the better um, charities that are out there today is one that I'm chairman of the board for, which is called Defend the Fatherless. And Defend the Fatherless is essentially an organization that aims to build community within our local and foster and adoptive families. And I think that the more we get people to see that there's a need in that particular community, the more helpful that they can become and that they can be. Don't be afraid to do something different or be considered to be different than others because of a choice that you made that may be impacting people today.
So good. So good. Great advice. Great advice. Well, we could probably just talk for days, but I want to thank you so much for being my guest, for sharing your personal story of giving, of caring, of reaching out to others. And you are just someone that we all need to take life lessons from and try to be more like, because you're just a good human, Anthony. That's what I say. We just need more good humans in this
Back
world.
at
And
you. Yes.
you're
Back
one.
at you. Yes.
And I am just thrilled that you were my guest today so that my audience could hear all the wonderful things that you're doing. And hopefully it will inspire them to make a difference too. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And that will do it for this edition of Conversations with Nicole. Until I see you again, I hope you have a great day.